Today on Uncommon Knowledge, gay marriage. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Funding for this program is provided by the John M. Olin Foundation.
Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. Our show today, gay marriage. On March 14, 2005, a California Superior Court judge ruled that the state's ban on gay marriage violates the California Constitution. It appears, Judge Richard Kramer wrote, that no rational purpose exists for limiting marriage in this state to opposite-sex partners. Although the decision is certain to be appealed to the California Supreme Court, California may now be on its way to joining Massachusetts in legalizing gay marriage. Did Judge Kramer rule correctly? Just how strong are the arguments for and against gay marriage? Joining us today, two guests. Tobias Barrington Wolff is a professor of law at the University of California at Davis. Terry Thompson is a lawyer with the Alliance Defense Fund. Marriage advocate Maggie Gallagher, quote, "The reality is that there is going to be a national definition of marriage. The question is whether it will be the novel definition now being foisted upon us by the courts or the one affirmed by the vast majority of the American people," close quote. Is that a fair way to frame the issue?
Nope, it's been said before and it wasn't right then and it's not right now.
Terry?
It's absolutely the right way to say it. The marriage is all about a man and a woman and rearing children.
All right. California Superior Court Judge Richard Kramer ruled this past spring in favor of gay marriage, arguing, as had the Supreme Court of Massachusetts before him, that restricting marriage to heterosexual couples lacks any rational basis. Let me give you another quotation. Editors of National Review magazine, quote, "Kramer does not hold that the reasons for holding the view of marriage as heterosexual that everyone has held for millennia are defeated by other better reasons. He holds that there are no good reasons in the first place. One would think that even a proponent of same-sex marriage would want to do better than that." Tobias, do you want to do better than that?
What Kramer held is that there are very good reasons for straight couples to want to be married, and that gay couples have exactly the same reasons to want to be married, and that there's no good reason to prevent them from doing so. And I think that's a very good argument indeed, and his argument was very persuasive. The fact is that...
Hold on. Any rational basis, there is no rational basis for denying marriage to same-sex couples. Now, surely, if you're going to be making a comprehensive argument and you're really trying to attempt to persuade the country, you have to say that, of course, there are rational bases. However, they are trumped by other better arguments. You just don't want to play that game at all?
Well, let me ask you a question, Peter. By conservative estimates, there are probably about 10 million gay men and lesbians in the United States. And they're going to be there. They're going to be having relationships, and they're going to be having kids, no matter what we do in our laws and no matter what courts say. And the question about whether gay and lesbian couples should have an equal right to get married under our state laws, we're talking about state laws here, we're not talking about private religious organizations. The question is, what is it rational to tell these folks that they should do? Should they just stop being gay? Are we telling them,
No.
go
Hold
have...
on. That was certainly not the question put to Judge Kramer. Judge Kramer simply had to ask, does the Constitution of the state of California make it impossible to prohibit same-sex marriage, right? That's really the question that he was facing.
The question he was facing was, does California have a good reason for telling gay and lesbian couples that they shouldn't have the same rights and the same opportunities that straight couples have?
A good constitutional reason.
I think that's the wrong way to frame the question. The question really is there a rational basis for the statutes that are on the book now? Does California have a rational basis for what, as we said in Prop 22?
Proposition 22, which was on the ballot in the year 2000 and passed by a 2-to-1 margin and defined marriage as that between a man and a woman in the state of California. Go ahead.
Only marriage between a man and a woman is valid or recognized in California.
Gotcha.
So that was Proposition 22. 61.4% of the people said that.
Right.
Very loud and clear. So the question is not, does it harm gay couples, or how does that harm me? But the question is there a rational purpose for having a law similar to what we just said that restricts marriage in California to only a man and a woman?
Okay, name a rational purpose.
Oh, it was not only a rational purpose, but I believe it's a compelling purpose. People are going to procreate.
Right.
And whether the government approves of it or not, or encourages it or discourages it, they will procreate. And it's the government's interest to steer procreation into marriage. If they do not, if children are, we don't want to be a Lord of the Flies type of society.
For my purposes, that's good enough. You've just named a rational reason. Judge Kramer bats it aside.
Now, a rational reason, Terry, I need you to explain a little bit more. A rational reason for having the institution of marriage, absolutely. A rational reason for excluding gay and lesbian couples from that institution, I don't get it. Gay and lesbian couples have kids. And we want them to be responsible, committed parents, just like straight couples.
Quick answer.
Yeah, well, I'll answer that. But first of all, gay and lesbian couples, by definition, can't procreate spontaneously. They have to have outside help. And so what the government is trying to do is narrowly tailor a law that will steer procreation into marriage.
Let's think about
Let's take a closer look at Terry's argument that the purpose of marriage is procreation. Whereas lots of heterosexual couples never have children, Judge Kramer makes this point and Tobias makes this point, many homosexual couples adopt children and many lesbian couples have children by way of artificial insemination as well as adoption. What do you do with that?
Okay, what we first have to do is why we have marriage, and we've said it's because we want to steer procreation into marriage.
Hold on.
Because...
Make a note. I want to know why you want marriage in a moment. I mean, what you think the institution is for. He says it's for procreation.
So the state has an interest in steering people that way. They give certain benefits. There's certain legal responsibilities so that the children, by and large, are raised with a mother and a father. It's not always the way, but this is, the state is tailored.
It is a crude instrument, but the intention is rational.
Intention is rational. So if we go to the other side, rather than saying what harm do same-sex marriages cause, we want to know, how does this implicate the state? Why is the state interested in sanctioning same-sex marriage?
I'd love to answer that question.
Isn't the logic of procreation that these days, when you go to get your marriage license, they ought to ask, what about children?
Yeah,
if it's impossible, you shouldn't get a marriage license, right?
Well, if we have people that can procreate spontaneously, accidentally, same-sex couples cannot. So the state has an interest in steering these people into marriage, the heterosexuals. Now, you're asking me, which is a very good question, why don't, say, I have some friends, 75 years old, both a widow and a widower. They got married. Well, they're both 75, and there's not much of a chance, I don't think, they're going to have any children. What this does, it's a lower basis. Maybe the state doesn't have as much interest, but what this does is models for younger people what marriage is supposed to be and what relationships are supposed to be. For heterosexual couples, the standard is being married, not cohabiting.
Now, here's what I answer to you. What I answer to you is, I am very suspicious. I think that what you're doing is coming up with the best argument you can, even though it doesn't really work very well. You have to stretch it and pull it to make it cover the cases that you just named, the hard cases. But what's really going on is that you consider homosexuality wrong. And by the way, you would not be alone. That has been the traditional understanding in Judeo-Christian morality. But that at this stage of the legal game in the 21st century, you feel inhibited from making such a claim in court, so you're falling back to your second best argument, and is it ever second best?
No, I think you have we were talking about the legal issues in court, and that's all we argued in front of.
But in other words, why don't you just say to the judge, look, here's a rational basis. Throughout the millennia of the development of the Judeo-Christian understanding, and it would be extremely easy to produce the documentation on this, it has been a central understanding of the majority opinion that homosexuality is in and of itself disordered or wrong or sinful. You can apply any number of words, and bowing to that overwhelming moral tradition is entirely rational. But nobody makes that argument, right?
No, they don't.
Would you feel that that was a more honest argument?
I think it's a more honest characterization of why a lot of folks are hostile towards gay and lesbian couples getting married.
The true animation of
absolutely.
Yeah, but all we're really talking about here is what's the state's interest, and the state has to have an interest in
this question. You know, in large measure, I'm very much in agreement with a great deal of what Terry has just said about the purposes behind marriage. Marriage is about steering people into responsible sexual behavior. It's about steering people into stable unions, which are good for them and are good for society, economically and socially. And it's about creating stable and secure home lives for kids, so that kids are going to be raised in the atmosphere where they'll be most likely to succeed. And, of course, these are all interests that gay and lesbian couples can partake of in exactly the same way.
Not quite exactly.
The suggestion that the fact that most straight couples, if they choose, can biologically procreate between each other, whereas gay couples either have kids from previous marriages or from whatever the case may be, I challenge you, both of you, to name a single right or benefit in law or society that we reserve to somebody who has been either produced as the result of a biological union between a married couple, or that we reserve to the parents because they are capable of biologically procreating. All the things that we provide to kids, all the things that we provide to couples, education, prenatal care, postnatal care, we don't say, but you're only going to get this if you and your husband or you and your wife can biologically procreate between the two of you. We say, however you have kids, we want to support those kids.
Next, comparing same-sex marriage to interracial marriage.
Judge Kramer, in his decision, cites a 1948 decision by the California Supreme Court striking down a law against interracial marriage. Marriage advocates argue that those laws against interracial marriage, which were prominent across the country, were about racism, not marriage. They were attempting to enforce racial understandings, not understandings of the underlying relationship of marriage. And let me quote Maggie Gallagher once again. If the courts adopt the view that, quote, favoring the traditional understanding of marriage is analogous to favoring racism, and Judge Kramer already has taken a large step in that direction, then many churches, faith-based organizations, and schools will eventually face penalties in the public square, close quote. So it's not quite just a matter of permitting marriage to gays and lesbians. Really, in order to do that, you have to rewrite social understandings of all kinds, and if you do it through the court, you're going to be overriding the popular will, or at least deeply and firmly embedded will of large organizations.
Right. Let me just say a few things to that. First of all, the issue of race and race discrimination and the issue of sexuality and sexual orientation discrimination are different in a lot of ways. They also raise some very similar issues that go to, for example, the question of whether society is going to try to mark off first-class and second-class citizens. The California Supreme Court, when it was presented with the anti-miscegenation laws, had
the same 48
decision
that Kramer cited.
Had the opportunity to rest that decision purely on arguments about racism. They were certainly presented to the court, and the court talked about racism in that opinion, but it also decided that it was incumbent upon the court to recognize that there was a deeper principle that applies to everybody, and it's a principle that says that it's a natural human, part of the human condition, to want to form connection with another human being, and that we form connection in ways that the state has an interest in fostering as secure and stable, and that people have a right to enter into that kind of stable relationship, and that an anti-miscegenation law impermissibly restricts that right for no good reason because of issues having to do with racism.
All of these miscegenation cases from Virginia v. Loving and Perez, each one of them had to do with a man and a woman, every one of them. Zablocki, Skinner, all of these whole series all had to do with a man and a woman. And the common law is based on marriage between a man and a woman. The judge cannot redefine marriage without getting into a separation of powers problem.
I just need to say...
The slippery slope argument. Let me ask Tobias whether extending marriage to include same-sex couples might eventually lead to the legalization of polygamy as well.
Talk about the natural human impulse to reach out for what, companionship or fulfillment,
and family.
And family, all right. How do you use that language but construct a barrier? Perhaps you don't wish to construct a barrier. How do you use that language while still constructing a barrier against polygamy?
I don't have an interest in sitting here and moralistically proclaiming that polygamy is wrong and against God's will and never to be considered.
Polygamy wouldn't bother you?
I find it personally distasteful. It's not something that I would be interested in. I think that the state has very good reasons for fostering stable relationships between two people, because I think there is good reason to believe that stability in a two-person relationship is fundamentally different from stability in a multiple-person relationship. It's also the case that polygamy in the United States has most frequently been practiced in ways that involve abuse and subordination of women. And to the extent that polygamy has been viewed very skeptically, it's been partly about trying to protect the equal status of women. And I think the state has a serious interest in making sure that the relationship
I think
it fosters is stable.
what you're talking about is a slippery slope argument. I think the state has a very, very...
Am I wasting time on it? Or
No, I think it's a serious problem. In the event that the state Supreme Court affirmed Judge Kramer's decision, there would be no principled reason for disallowing marriage relationships between, for example, a mother and her daughter. They have no interest in sex, but they want to get the incidences of marriage. They want the benefits.
Now, that's
At
just
that
a silly
point, let me
thing
just finish.
I don't see why.
I don't see why, and they would. Why not me and my business partner? My wife dies, my business partner, so I won't have to write a buy-sell agreement. What about, heard a lot about the bisexual folks recently.
Why is it silly?
It is silly because to suggest that there is no principled difference between a gay or lesbian couple who are in love with each other, who are committed to each other, and who want to spend...
How do you test for love?
Well, how do you test for love in the marriage institution now, for heaven's sake? I mean, if your business partner is a woman and you two view some business
Fine, but you're making his argument. You're making his argument.
The two you can get married today.
There's a great confusion between the emotional aspects and the state's interest. My wife is, I think, a very beautiful woman. I was attracted to her, sexually attracted, she's intelligent. I couldn't wait to get out of college to marry her.
This is a PBS show now. Settle down.
Excuse me,
Go ahead.
I'm glad it's a space I can talk about sex first. That's
and I suspect some of the exactly same feelings are held by same-sex couples.
Right, okay.
Right. But the state has absolutely no interest. They don't care a rat's eyebrow about my feeling for my wife. That doesn't impact the state's or implicate the state's interest. What does implicate the state's interest, they knew that when my wife and I got married, we were likely to procreate, and it might be by accident, and they didn't want our children to be wards of the state.
The folks on the other side of this debate always talk about threats to the institution of marriage. That characterization of marriage seems to be one of the greatest threats that I've heard in a long time. It is such a denuded and thin and really sort of tragic characterization of what marriage is about. Marriage is about a connection between people who are in love with each other and making a life together.
It's not about an emotional attachment. It's about the state's interest in steering procreation into marriage. It's not about emotion. It's not about love. That may be a reason that someone's
But on
get
your
married.
argument, if you try to bring that fuller, richer, which I mean, let the poets speak. Yes, that's closer to our understanding, at least what we all hope to end up in a married relationship, right? But if that's your principal definition of marriage, then I can't begin to see grounds for excluding polygamy or excluding, maybe it's an act. Maybe the mother and the daughter, all they want is certain legal benefits, but they come in and say, we're in love with each other. I don't see the grounds for excluding it.
Well, we've talked about polygamy ad nauseum. The reasons in the past, and I think still in the present, why incestuous relationships have been excluded from marriage and from sexual relationships is, number one, the danger that those are not, that's a great danger that those are not going to be consensual relationships, that there's a great opportunity for coercion in the family context.
Okay.
And second, that if you allow and encourage sexual relationships within the family, then you're going to destabilize families by always having the possibility of competition within the family.
All I would like to observe is the blame.
Next, will opponents of gay marriage ultimately be forced to seek passage of a constitutional amendment?
Judge Robert Bork, speaking on this program, as a matter of fact, just over a year ago, the Supreme Court of the United States is ready to give a right to homosexual marriage, or at least will be ready in a few years. The only way to stop this is a constitutional amendment saying that marriage is something between a man and a woman, close quote. Now, first question is just sort of predictive. Is he right about that? Do you think that the court, the Lawrence decision, that the court is moving in the direction of granting a right to gay marriage?
I don't think the court is going to be ready to take up that issue for some time.
Sometime is a decade or 3 years or?
You know, playing sort of baseball in the Supreme Court is a hard thing to do. I think it's not going to be anytime soon.
Okay. What do you think?
Yeah, I think first we'll have, I think Judge Kramer has put some rocket fuel under this federal marriage amendment. I think we're going to go with the federal marriage amendment, and I suspect we may have a constitutional amendment in California as well. and I predict we're going to win in the Supreme Court in California.
You really have two large points of yours have emerged on this program. One is that you don't want the courts overturning an ancient social understanding, which until now nobody has really questioned, is also reflected in law, right?
Right.
So you don't want it to happen through the courts.
Right.
So that means that you have no choice now but to direct your argument to the people, get a ballot initiative, a constitutional amendment. Frankly, I can't remember how the Constitution of California gets amended. Can that be done by ballot?
It can be done by sneezing.
Oh, is it that easy?
There's a robust tradition of amending the Constitution in California.
Do you genuinely, now, here are the people you need to persuade. You've already got your folks with you. The people who would tend to be waverers would be mildly liberal and centrist, probably Democrats.
Sure.
Do you think that this procreation argument, which, in my judgment, Tobias has rightly suggested, doesn't cover anything like all cases, and in the second place is a really denuded, stripped-down, cold definition of marriage, how can you hope to persuade the great mass of people in the middle?
Right. You have to do some persuasion because people are compassionate. It's the same compassion we had 30 years ago when we were worried about a few people who were in bad marriages. So we had no-fault divorce.
Right.
But we had unintended consequences. And now we have maybe 50% of the marriages end up in divorce with children that are split. So we do have unintended consequences because of our compassion. So,
but you'd stick with that procreation argument.
Sure, I'd stick with the procreation argument. And also, I think it's very important that people shouldn't be offended. Gays, lesbians should not be offended that we want to steer procreation into marriage because it's better for everybody. It's common sense that children do best with a mother and a father. If we
Terry, how can you say that gay and lesbian couples should not be offended by the suggestion that it's common sense that they're inherently less good parents?
I didn't say that. There are certainly there are anecdotal that they're bad heterosexual parents, and there's probably some good. Not probably, there are good same-sex parents. But I think it's a good thing. An anecdotal thing.
It's a good thing to be reasonable.
In general.
It's a good thing to be reasonable, but I think that to suggest that you can package all of these arguments in sort of legalistic sounding terms and just ignore the real harms that are being done to gay and lesbian couples and their children in the United States right now is really
Tobias,
just unfair.
Question for you.
Finally, predictions. What's the future of gay marriage?
Now, a decade from now, gay marriage will be, this is a multiple choice question, A, permitted throughout the country, B, permitted in only a few states, but permitted in some states, or C, be forbidden by virtue of an amendment to the Constitution. A decade from now, what do you think is going to be the actual fact as a matter of political prognostication? Tobias?
Gay couples will be permitted and will be very successfully taking advantage of the opportunity to be married in a relatively small number of states.
I see. Okay. Terry?
I think the remainder, already we have 37 states that have passed DOMA, Defense of Marriage Acts, either as a statute or a constitutional amendment. I predict that will continue. I predict California will probably enact a constitutional amendment. Proposition 22 ended up as a statute, not as
without any help from the governor, by the way. He's already said that he will take the ruling of the California Supreme Court as final. So it'll have to be by you rather than Arnold Schwarzenegger. You still think you could get it through?
Yeah, we're going to do it in California, right? But I think it's going to, I suspect there'll also be a lot of pressure for a federal marriage amendment.
A decade from now, will gay marriage at least be permitted in Massachusetts, whose Supreme Court has already said it is legal?
I don't know. They're going to be, I think it's another year or so before it finally gets to this constitutional amendment in Massachusetts. You may be more up on it than I am.
Massachusetts is a great note to end on because
I'm not sure.
The fact is that in Massachusetts, gay and lesbian couples have been getting married for 10 months now, as of the time. This is filming more than a year by the time this program airs.
Any idea of the number of couples?
The last number that I've heard is about 5,000, but I'm not sure.
That's a big number.
And divorce rates have not skyrocketed in Massachusetts. Society as we know it has not ended in Massachusetts. And people are starting to figure out that really this is just about equal treatment.
So let's say, so within 2 years, the governor of Massachusetts, Mitt Romney, will indeed have a constitutional amendment before the people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Well, it's not up to Governor Romney. It's up to the Massachusetts legislature sitting in Constitutional Convention, and I think there's very good reason to think that they are not going to go forward with that step.
So,
yeah, I disagree with Tobias' characterization of what will happen, that everything is cool and nothing is going to change. And I think you only have to look to Scandinavia, where in the Netherlands in 2001 they did adopt same-sex marriage, and things are changing there. You look at all of Scandinavia. In some liberal parts of Scandinavia, marriage is non-existent, And
that's gay people's fault?
Here's what happens. Heterosexuals don't want to get married.
Because of gay people?
Because the marriage does not mean what it used to mean.
Because of gay people?
This
No,
is
because of
not
the change of the law.
Not a change of the law, not because of the people.
The claim
this
is
the result.
You are arguing that that change in the law in Sweden, right? It's not, Denmark is the more conservative.
Yeah, it's in the Netherlands and Norway
Okay.
and Sweden, yes.
And that the change in the law has indeed affected behavior.
It's drastic effects. I used to be an engineer. You don't do something that's going to change society
Engineers know that
without doing a pilot plant.
Engineers know that you have to look for causal relationships. In the last 4 years, greenhouse gases have skyrocketed, and that's not gay people's fault in the Netherlands either. You need to show a causal relationship, and you can't do
Exactly
that.
my point. You have to look at long-term results.
Thank you very much, Terry Thompson, Tobias Barrington Wolff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Peter Robinson for Uncommon Knowledge. Thanks for joining us.
We welcome your comments on this week's show. Our email address, comments@uncommonknowledge.tv. For more information about Uncommon Knowledge, please visit our website, www.uncommonknowledge.tv.
Funding for this program was provided by the John M. Olin Foundation.